Good morning, students. I'm back with the second part of the video on human rights and the age of inequality, which is in the course study of Class 12's Compulsory English book, Unit 37. In this part, we shall be dealing with 7 major questions given in your book. So the next question is, what are 2 big stages that involve writing the history of human rights in relation to that of political economy? The answer to this question would be to trace the history of human rights through the lens of political economy. Scholars generally focus on 2 seismic shifts or 2 stages in the period of history. These stages represent the transition from rights as a tool for state building to rights as a global regulatory framework, often as an opposition with local economic sovereignty. The first stage is the era of national welfare and social rights, that is the period between 1940s to 1970s. After the World War II, the first stage was defined by the Keynesian consensus. In this period, human rights were deeply connected with the rise of the industrial welfare state, where economic rights like labor protections, social security, healthcare were seen as essential to preventing the kind of economic desperation that led to the rise of fascism or the dictatorial power. Next, the political economy. This was an era of embedded liberalism, where markets were subject to heavy state regulation. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 reflected this by including right to work and social welfare provisions alongside civil liberties. The main goal of this stage was to create a social floor within the national state. Rights were a domestic contract between a government and its citizens. The next stage is the neoliberalism and global governance. That is the period from 1970s to the present state. This second stage emerged during the economic crisis of the 1970s. That is the end of the gold standard and the oil shocks, leading to a radical mixture of rights from state led to economic management. This was pioneered by thinkers like Samuel Moyn. Human rights became the last utopia. As grand socialist or nationalist economic projects failed, the international community focused on the individual rights, specifically on civil and political rights, like freedom of speech and fair trials or punishment. Now, the political economy, this coincided with neoliberalism characterized by privatization, deregulation, and the Washington Consensus. While global human rights advocacy exploded, it often focused on protecting individuals from state violence while remaining silent on the systemic economic inequality caused by global markets. In this way, rights moved from being a domestic economic obligation to an international legal standard. Some people argue that this stage successfully promoted sufficiency. That is, it kept people from being tortured, but it failed to address equality. That is, the widening gap between rich and poor. Now let's go to the next question. What are the facts that have been missed in Roosevelt's call for a second Bill of Rights? When Franklin D. Roosevelt delivered his 1944 Statement of the Union Address, he proposed a second Bill of Rights. While often remembered as a visionary blueprint for economic security, several historical and structural factors are frequently overlooked in modern discussions. Here are the key factors that often go missing from the narrative. Number 1, it was a war measure and not just social policy. Roosevelt didn't frame these rights purely out of idealism. He framed them as a necessity for national security. He argued that needy men are not free men. and that people struggling for basic survival were the primary breeding ground for the dictatorship and demagogues that had fueled World War II. He viewed economic rights as a literal defense mechanism against the return of global fascism or dictatorship. Number 2, the lack of constitutional ambition. A common misconception is that Roosevelt wanted to formally amend or correct the US Constitution. In reality, he never proposed a formal article by article amendment process. He intended these rights to be implemented through congressional legislation and felt that the existing Constitution was flexible enough to accommodate them if interpreted correctly. Number 3, it excessively targeted the old guard. The speech was a direct political attack on the coalition of Republicans and Southern Democrats in Congress who had been demanding New Deal programs since 1938. By labeling economic security as a right, he was trying to make it politically impossible for his opponents to cut social spending without appearing to violate the fundamental rights of American citizens. Number 4, the missing rights of the 1940s. Even though his proposal was quite comprehensive for its time, it had many blind spots by modern standards. In the areas like civil rights, the speech conspicuously avoided the issue of racial segregation and Jim Crow laws. Roosevelt needed the support of Southern Democrats, so the Second Bill of Rights remained silent on the racial inequities that prevented Black Americans from accessing New Deal benefits. And in environmental protection, the focus was entirely on industrial growth and resource extraction to ensure full employment with no mention of ecological sustainability. Number 5, influence abroad versus failure at home. The most ironic missed fact is that while the Second Bill of Rights failed to gain legislative importance in the United States, it became a primary blueprint for international law. It served as the foundation for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948, championed by Eleanor Roosevelt. So it heavily influenced the post-war constitution of Germany, Italy, and Japan. Let's talk about the Economic Bill of Rights. Franklin D. Roosevelt's list focused on 8 specific economic guarantees to the people. Employment right, that is the right to get a useful and remunerative job. Second, living wage right, that is the right to earn enough to provide food, clothing, and recreation for himself and his family. The right to fair competition, that is the right of every businessman to be free from unfair competitions or monopolies. The right to housing, that is the right of every family to a decent home. The right to medical care, that is the right to adequate medical care and the opportunity to achieve good health. The right to social security, that is the protection from the economic fears of old age, sickness, accident, and unemployment. Next was the right to education, that is the right to a good education, and the right of agriculture, that is the right of every farmer to raise and sell products for a decent return. Now the next question is, write the truth expressed in Herodotus' histories. Herodotus, often called the father of history and occasionally the father of lies, didn't aim for a singular objective truth in the way a modern data scientist might. Instead, his histories expressed a multifaceted truth about human nature, power, and the inevitable cycle of the rise and fall. At its core, Herodotus' truth can be broken down into a few fundamental themes. Number 1, the instability of human fortune. The most famous truth Herodotus expresses is that human prosperity never remains in the same place. He believed in a cosmic balance where great power eventually invites its own destruction. The concept of envy. He suggested that the gods are envious of human success. If a man becomes too powerful or too arrogant, then a great leveling occurs. The circle of life. For many states that were once great have now become small, and those that are great in this time were once a small one. Number 2, custom is king. Herodotus was an early cultural relativist. He believed the truth of how to live is entirely dependent on where you were born. The experiment. He famously tells the story of the Persian king Darius, who asked Greeks if they would eat their dead fathers. They were horrified and then asked a tribe called the Calatia, who did eat their dead, if they would burn them on a pyre. They were equally horrified. So the conclusion to this would be, truth is subjective to culture. Every nation believes that its own customs are the best. Number 3, the conflict between East and West. Herodotus framed the truth of his era as an ideological struggle between autocracy and freedom. Persia represented absolute rule, where one man, the great king, owned everything, everyone else was a slave. And Greece represented isonomia, that is equality before the law, and the idea that men fight harder when they are fighting for themselves rather than for a master. Number 4, inquiry over dogma, historia. The word historia actually meant inquiry or research. Herodotus' truth was that the pursuit of multiple perspectives is valuable, even if some of those perspectives are wrong. Often presents 3 different versions of a story and says, I am bound to tell what I am told, but not in every case to believe it. By doing this, he expresses a journalistic truth, acknowledging that history is a collection of memories and testimonies rather than a single undisputed narrative. So Herodotus' key philosophies are: excessive pride leads to a fall. Culture and custom dictate human morality. No man can escape what is destined in his fate, not even a king. And free men are more effective than subjects of a tyrant. In short, Herodotus expressed the truth that history is a moral teacher. He wasn't just recording dates. He was trying to show that while empires crumble and kings fail, the patterns of human behavior remain remarkably consistent. Herodotus was of the idea that custom is the king. Another question is, why is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights important to you? The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or UDHR, is more than just a historical document. It is the moral compass for the modern world. Its importance to us today lies in how it protects your daily life and shapes the way societies function. Here is why it matters to me personally and to us as a global community. Number 1, it protects our everyday freedom. You might take certain things for granted, but the UDHR is the legal and moral reason you have the right to express your opinion without being thrown in jail, that is freedom of speech. We can practice our faith or choose not to follow any religion. We can work in fair conditions and receive an education. We have the privacy, ensuring the state can't interfere with our home or family. Number 2, it provides a shield against power. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights shifts the power dynamics between the government and the individual. It asserts that your rights are inalienable, meaning they weren't given to you by a government, so a government cannot take them away. This gives citizens a vocabulary of protest to demand better treatment when authorities overstep. Number 3, it is the blueprint for justice. Most of the laws that protect you today grew out of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Over 90 countries have incorporated the UDHR's language into their own national constitutions. International courts, it provides the legal basis for the International Criminal Court, ICC, to prosecute war crimes and genocide. Equality, it is the primary tool used to fight for the rights of women, LGBTQ plus individuals, indigenous people, and minorities. Number 4, it sets a global standard of decency. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights makes it impossible for a country to claim that abusing its citizens is none of the world's business. Because of this document, the international community has the right and the duty to speak up and intervene when human rights are violated, regardless of borders. Or in summary, we can say, the personal benefits are, it guarantees your right to life, liberty, and security of person. The legal benefit is that it forms the basis for local laws that protect you from discrimination. And the global benefit is, it promotes peace by ensuring people aren't driven to rebellion by tyranny. Now, next question. Is another human rights movement necessary? Why? The question of whether a new human rights movement is necessary is one of the most pressing debates in modern sociology and law. While the foundational principles established after World War II remain relevant, many experts argue that the nature of threats has evolved so significantly that our current frameworks are struggling to keep up. Let's analyze why a new wave or a major evolution of the movement is often considered essential. Number 1, the rise of digital and data rights. The 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights could not have expected a world driven by algorithms. A new movement is necessary to address algorithm bias, ensuring AI doesn't automate discrimination in hiring, policing, or lending. The right to privacy, redefining search and seizure in an era of mass surveillance and data harvesting. The right to be forgotten, that is protecting individuals from their past digital footprints. Number 2, climate change and environmental rights. Traditional human rights are often anthropocentric, that is, focused solely on humans. A growing movement argues for environmental rights, which include right to a healthy environment, recognizing that life, health, and property rights are impossible without a stable climate. Intergenerational equity, the idea that current generations have a legal obligation to preserve the planet for those not yet born. Climate refugees, modern international law does not yet fully recognize or protect people displaced by environmental disasters. Number 3, economic inequality and bread rights. While civil and political rights, that is freedom of speech, right to vote, are well established in many places, social and economic rights have lagged behind. A new movement might focus on universal basic services, redefining access to healthcare, internet, and housing as fundamental rights rather than market commodities. Number 4, addressing rights inflation versus enforcement. Some critics argue we don't need new rights, but rather better enforcement of existing ones. They worry that rights inflation, labeling every social desire a human right dilutes the power of the core principles. The implementation gap. Many countries have signed treaties but do not follow them. The shift to global corporate power. Human rights frameworks were designed to limit the power of states, but today multinational corporations often hold more influence over lives than governments do. The necessity of a new movement usually boils down to adaptability. Just as the movement evolved from 18th century natural rights to 20th century human rights, the 21st century presents unique challenges like global pandemics, AI, and planetary collapse that the original architects simply couldn't have envisioned. Now, the last question. What are the challenges in maintaining human rights in Nepal? Maintaining human rights in Nepal remains a complex endeavor shaped by the scars of past conflict and the growing pains of a young federal republic. While the 2015 constitution provides a robust framework for rights, the gap between law and practice is significant. The following are the primary challenges facing human rights in Nepal as of 2026. Number 1. Stalled transitional justice. 2 decades after the end of the Civil War, that is from 1996 to 2006, justice for victims remains elusive. Delayed investigations. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC, and the Commission of Investigation on Enforced Disappeared Persons, CIEDP, have faced years of political interference and lack of resources. Amnesty concerns. There is ongoing tension between political leaders seeking broad amnesties and victims groups demanding accountability for war-era crimes like extrajudicial killings and torture. Recent developments. While new regulations were endorsed in early 2026 to expedite these commissions, advocates remain skeptical about the political will to prosecute high-level perpetrators. Number 2. Deep-rooted caste discrimination. Despite being legally outlawed, the untouchability system continues to marginalize Dalit communities. Systemic violence. Dalits frequently face physical violence and social boycotts, particularly in rural areas, often over issues like intercaste marriage or access to communal resources, example water taps, and public places like temples. Legal impunity. Police often refuse to register first information reports, FIRs, for caste-based crimes, and conviction rates remain staggeringly low. Number 3. Civil liberties and freedom of expression. Recent years have been a tightening of the space for dissent. Digital crackdowns. The 2025 Gen Z protests were triggered by a government ban on social media platforms, including YouTube and Facebook, and corruption scandals. Although the ban was lifted after the resignation of Prime Minister KP Oli, the threat of restrictive legislation like the social media bill remains. Harassment of journalists. Reporters covering political corruption or election irregularities continue to face physical attacks and legal intimidation under the Electronic Transaction Act. Number 4. Gender inequality and citizenship rights. While Nepal has made strides in political representation with quotas for women, structural barriers persist. Discriminatory citizenship laws. Mothers still face greater hurdles than fathers in passing citizenship to their children, effectively rendering thousands of people stateless or dependent on male relatives for documentation. Gender-based violence. Domestic violence and harmful traditional practices like chhaupadi, despite being criminalized, continue to restrict the rights of women and quarrels in many provinces. Number 5. Impunity and law enforcement. A major hurdle is the culture of impunity within the security forces. Excessive use of force. During the 2025 protests, police were criticized for using lethal force, leading to scores of deaths. Investigations into such incidents are rarely transparent and seldom led to the prosecution of high-ranking officials. Torture in detention. Reports of custodial torture and ill treatment in a persistent concern, often used as a tool for forced confessions. I think students, these question answers will help you a lot in your final exams, because this chapter of human rights and the age of inequality is so important in class 12 that in every final exam, one important and difficult question will always come from this chapter. And this lesson is so vast and vague for students to comprehend in one go.